It was one of those mornings that looked completely ordinary to everyone else, but something about it carried a quiet weight for the woman standing at the bus stop. Her name was Lena, and she blended into the crowd so naturally that no one gave her a second look. She wore a light jacket, simple shoes, and carried a worn-out shoulder bag with a few papers tucked inside. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything more than a regular citizen with errands to run. And maybe that was why people around her barely noticed her. The city was already awake, humming with its usual mix of traffic noise, rushed footsteps, and conversations that drifted in the air like faint echoes. As the bus approached, she stepped forward calmly, letting others board ahead of her. That was how she always behaved: quiet, patient, and never trying to draw attention. A few people even brushed past her without saying a word, but she didn't mind. She wasn't here to impress anyone. The bus ride itself was short. Lena sat near the window, watching familiar buildings pass by. She mentally reviewed everything she needed to do that morning. She wasn't someone who liked making scenes or causing problems. If anything, she preferred working quietly. But today wasn't about preference. Today, she needed answers. For weeks, the construction near her neighborhood had become a serious problem. Huge trucks rumbled in and out, blocking streets. Dust filled the air. The loud drilling shook windows early in the morning, and several homes, even the old houses at the end of the lane, had started showing cracks in their walls. A few had even gone to complain, but nothing changed. It was as if their voices were invisible. So Lena decided she would try herself. She wasn't expecting trouble. She simply expected someone in the city office to listen. When the bus stopped near the municipal building, she stepped onto the sidewalk and took a deep breath. The building stood tall and gray, with the sort of heavy doors that suggested entering it meant stepping into a different world. People hurried in and out, some with folders, others with frustrated looks on their faces. It was clear that this office wasn't known for warm service. Still, she walked in. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity. A woman at the reception desk looked overwhelmed, trying to direct people while juggling phone calls. A few guards stood near the entrance, chatting among themselves, not really paying attention. The line for general assistance stretched toward the wall, and Lena stepped behind the last person. No one glanced at her. No one asked what she needed. She was just one more person waiting like everyone else. As minutes turned into almost an hour, the line moved slowly. People shifted on their feet, sighed loudly, and checked their watches. A man behind Lena muttered about how he had taken a day off work and would probably regret it. Someone else ahead complained softly that the staff always behaved as if helping anyone was a burden. Lena stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that getting angry never helped in places like this. When her turn finally came, she walked to the counter. The clerk, a young man who looked more tired than irritated, stared at her as if waiting for her to hurry up. "Form?" he asked flatly. "I'm here to ask about the construction in my neighborhood," she said politely. "I need to file a concern about safety issues." He blinked, annoyed. "You need the green form. Line on the right. Next." Before she could ask which form exactly, he had already waved her away and called the next person forward. Lena stepped aside, trying not to feel discouraged. She moved to the right line, which was shorter but much slower. A woman at the counter spoke sharply to each person, cutting them off mid-sentence. People walked away from her desk looking even more confused than before. When Lena finally reached her, she gave a small smile. "Good morning. I was told I need a green form for a construction complaint. Could you please tell me which one?" The woman didn't even let her finish. "If you don't already know what you're filing, you're in the wrong line," she snapped. "We can't guess what you need." "I'm not asking you to guess," Lena replied gently. "I just need to know which form applies to safety violations." "Safety," the woman repeated, rolling her eyes. "Everyone thinks everything is a violation. Do you have proof? Do you have photos? Do you even know the contractor? Because if you don't, you're wasting time." The people standing nearby turned their heads, watching the exchange. Lena felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not from fear, but from the knowledge that she was being dismissed before she could even explain herself. "I have some documents with me," she said softly. "And I just need to submit a concern so that someone can check." "Look," the woman cut in again, her voice rising. We have real cases to deal with today. If you don't have the right form or enough information, you're blocking the line. Step aside and let someone else come through." A few people shifted awkwardly, unsure if they should intervene or pretend not to notice. The room's noise seemed to fade as the woman behind the counter stared at Lena, waiting for her to leave. Lena lowered her gaze for a moment, steadying her thoughts. She only wanted the office to take the situation seriously. Her neighbors trusted her to speak for them. She couldn't just walk out. "I'm not trying to block the line," Lena said quietly. "I just need to know the procedure. Construction is damaging homes. It's shaking the ground every morning. Children and elders live on that street. Someone needs to look into it." The clerk laughed under her breath. "Everyone has complaints. You're not special. Take a seat somewhere and read the board on the wall if you want information. Don't expect us to hold your hand." A guard who had been watching from nearby stepped forward, clearly annoyed. Amy said with a firm tone, "If you can't follow instructions, you need to move away from the counter. You're slowing down the process." Lena turned toward him calmly. "I'm only asking for help." "I haven't raised my voice or caused a problem. That's not the point," he said, folding his arms. "You're here without the right form. That already makes it a problem." Several people in line exchanged looks, some sympathetic, others simply tired of waiting. The clerk leaned back in her chair, looking proud of the fact that the guard had stepped in. Lena held her bag a little tighter, still trying to remain respectful. She didn't want to embarrass anyone or escalate the situation. But she couldn't understand why something so simple had turned into a confrontation. "If I could just speak to someone who handles public safety, she'll try it again. I can explain clearly. I'm sure this is something the office will want to know about." The guard raised an eyebrow. "You think you know more about what this office wants than the people who work here?" Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. The guard's voice had grown louder, and the room had gone even quieter. A few people stepped back, sensing tension. The clerk leaned forward again and said, "Just go sit down or come back another day. We don't have time for confused people right now." Confused. The words settled in the air like a small insult. Lena kept her expression calm. Her heart beat steadily, not faster, but with a kind of steady patience that came from experience. She knew when to speak. She knew when to wait. And she knew the moment had come when she would need to stop trying to handle things the easy way. The guard moved a little closer, invading her personal space. "Last warning," he said. "Step away now." Lena looked at him, then at the clerk. Then at the dozen onlookers who had begun whispering among themselves. She gave a small exhale, one that carried both calm and a quiet decision. She reached into her bag. Not quickly, not dramatically, just slowly, with controlled movements. The clerk frowned. The guard tensed slightly, unsure what she was about to pull out. People nearby leaned forward, curious. Lena's hand disappeared. Into her bag, brushing past papers, documents, and a small notebook. Her fingers touched the object she had kept hidden until now, an object she never used unless it was absolutely necessary. She took hold of it gently, and as she began to pull it out, the room seemed to breathe differently, unaware that everything was about to change. When Lena slowly pulled her hand from her bag, the whole room seemed to pause. People who had been mumbling under their breath fell into complete silence. Even the guard, who seconds earlier sounded confident and impatient, took a small step back. But Lena didn't rush. Her movements were steady, almost gentle, as though she didn't want to startle anyone. What she placed on the counter was not what anyone expected. It wasn't a complaint form, or a stack of photos, or anything dramatic. It was just a simple leather wallet told smooth around the edges and clearly well used. But the moment it touched the counter, something about the atmosphere changed. Although no one yet knew why. The clerk squinted at it. "What's that? Supposed to be?" she asked, her tone more irritated than curious. Lena didn't answer right away. She opened the wallet slowly, revealing a glimpse of something metallic inside, but she didn't show it fully yet. She wasn't doing it for attention. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She was simply preparing herself for what might come next. Before she could speak, another person in line let out a small huff. "Can we move this along? Some of us have actual work to get back to." The guard raised a hand to silence the crowd, even though he had no idea what Lena was about to reveal. His voice softened just a little. "Ma'am, what is that?" Lena looked at him not with anger, not with frustration, but with a kind of calm that made people instinctively quiet down. She lifted the wallet slightly so the guard could see inside, but still didn't say a word. The guard leaned in, his eyes narrowing, trying to understand what he was seeing. His mouth fell open just a bit. The clerk noticed his reaction. "What? What is it?" she asked, leaning forward. But Lena closed the wallet again, still not revealing it fully. She wasn't ready yet. First, she wanted to make sure she spoke, clearly and respectfully, because she never wanted to use her status as a weapon. She only used it when it could protect people or ensure fairness. "I came here to follow the same process as everyone else," she said quietly. "I waited in line. I asked for information politely. I tried to follow the system you have in place." The clerk folded her arms, unimpressed. "And nobody treated you badly. We told you what to do." Several people in the room exchanged glances. It was clear to everyone else that the clerk and the guard had been far from respectful, but neither of them seemed aware of it. Lena didn't argue. She simply continued, "I don't like to inconvenience anyone. I don't want special treatment. But I do need to make sure the report gets filed correctly." The guard frowned again. "Why didn't you say earlier who you were?" She looked at him calmly. "Because people should be treated with respect even when you don't know who they are." Her words hung in the air like a soft echo. A few people nodded quietly. One older man near the wall murmured, "She's right." The clerk flushed slightly, her confidence slipping. "Well, you still haven't shown anything." "All we've seen is a wallet." Lena hesitated. She knew that once she showed her badge, everything would shift. Suddenly people would be overly polite. The energy in the room would change. The guards would probably stiffen up. The clerks would start apologizing. She didn't want any of that. She always preferred being unseen, unnoticed. It allowed her to observe the true state of things. But the construction near her neighborhood was serious. And if the office wasn't going to take her complaint seriously, she didn't have another choice. She opened the wallet a second time. This time she lifted it slightly higher. The guard saw it clearly. His face drained of color. "Ma'am," he whispered, suddenly much more cautious. Why didn't you tell us?" The clerk's eyes widened as she finally understood. She leaned in, looking stunned. "Wait, is that—" Lena closed the wallet again and placed it gently on the counter. She didn't brag. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't act powerful. She only said, "I'm here on personal time. Not official business. But if you aren't willing to help a regular citizen, then I need to ensure someone does." The silence that followed was sharp and heavy. Even the phones at the desk seemed to stop ringing for a moment. People in the waiting area sat straighter, whispering softly but respectfully. The clerk swallowed hard. Her earlier arrogance slipped away completely. I didn't know," she said, barely above a whisper. "You weren't supposed to know," Lena replied. "But you were supposed to treat everyone fairly." Guard, suddenly unsure of himself, took a step back and adjusted his shirt collar nervously. "If I'd known," he mumbled. "You shouldn't need to know," Lena said. "No one here should have to prove themselves worthy of respect." Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't sharp. It was simply true. At that moment, an older supervisor stepped out of a side office. He had clearly heard a bit of the commotion and walked over with a confused expression. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking around. The clerk pointed weakly at Lena. She has a badge." The supervisor raised an eyebrow. "A badge? What kind?" Lena picked up the wallet one more time. She didn't lift it high, didn't make a dramatic display. She simply opened it just enough for him to see. The supervisor's whole posture changed instantly. His shoulders straightened. His voice softened. "Ma'am, I apologize for the behavior you faced. Please step into my office. I'll handle your concern personally." Lena shook her head gently. "I'm not here to get anyone in trouble. I only want the complaint filed. Anyone could have helped me." The supervisor nodded slowly, his face serious. "That may be true, but the conduct you experienced is unacceptable. We pride ourselves on serving the public. Today, we failed at that." The clerk lowered her eyes. The guard stared at the floor, clearly regretting his tone earlier. Lena took a soft breath. She didn't want to embarrass them further. She simply wanted the process to work the way it was meant to. The supervisor stepped aside. "Please, come with me. I'll make sure everything is done correctly." But before Lena followed him, she turned to look at the other people waiting in line. They watched her with a mixture of respect, surprise, and quiet relief. Some of them may have faced similar treatment and were glad someone finally stood up for them. One woman near the back smiled faintly at Lena. Another man gave her a small nod. As if thanking her without words, Lena felt a warmth in her chest. She didn't crave recognition, but she understood what her presence meant in that moment. She walked toward the supervisor's office. The door closed behind them, leaving the rest of the room buzzing with whispered conversations. Once inside, the supervisor pulled out a chair for her. "Please sit," he said politely. Lena sat down, placing her bag next to her. The supervisor took a seat opposite her, his demeanor respectful and attentive. "Tell me everything," he said. "Start from the beginning. I want to understand clearly what's happening in your neighborhood." Lena explained everything. How the construction crew worked late into the night, how the trucks damaged the road, how homes started showing cracks, and how the noise frightened children and older residents. She showed him the photos she had taken on her phone. She even handed him a small notebook where she had written dates, times, and observations. As she spoke, the supervisor took notes. His expression grew more concerned with every detail. "This is serious," he said finally. "This isn't just a minor inconvenience. This could become dangerous." "That's what we've been trying to tell people," Lena replied softly. He nodded. "I'm sorry no one listened earlier. But I'm listening now." He stood and went to his filing cabinet, pulling out the correct forms. He placed them neatly on the desk and began filling them out for her. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I can fill them myself." "No," he said gently. "You already waited long enough. Let me handle this." For the first time that morning, Lena felt a sense of relief. Someone was finally taking her seriously, not because of her badge, but because he genuinely cared. When they finished, the supervisor looked up at her. "I'm sending this to our safety review team immediately. They'll visit the site today." Lena gave a small nod. "Thank you." He hesitated before speaking again. "Can I ask why you didn't show your badge in the beginning?" Lena smiled faintly. "Because I didn't come here as an official. I came here as someone who cares about her community. And community members shouldn't need a badge to be treated decently." The supervisor didn't respond for a moment. Then he gave a deep, respectful nod. "You're right." He walked her out of the office himself. When the door opened, all eyes in the lobby turned to them. People straightened up, not out of fear, but out of respect. The clerk and guard who had confronted her earlier avoided her gaze. They looked embarrassed, and rightly so. Lena didn't glare at them. She didn't scold them. She simply walked past them with a calm grace that made them shift awkwardly in place. As she reached the exit, she heard someone call gently, "Thank you." She turned slightly and saw the older man from the line raising a hand at her. She smiled softly. "You're welcome." And then she stepped outside, back into the bright morning light. The city continued moving as if nothing unusual had happened. But Lena knew the moment inside the office had mattered for her. For the people watching, and even for the staff who had forgotten what respect looked like. She walked down the stairs slowly, feeling lighter than before. The real work wasn't done yet. But the first step had been taken, and that alone changed everything. Lena walked away from the municipal building with a mix of relief and heaviness sitting quietly inside her. The morning sun had risen higher, warming the sidewalk and cutting across the city in soft stripes of gold. People hurried around her, absorbed in their own lives, unaware of the storm she had stepped out of. But Lena didn't feel angry. She didn't feel triumphant either. She simply felt thoughtful, even though the supervisor had treated her kindly in the end. The way things had unfolded bothered her. She had not gone there to pull rank. She hadn't wanted to reveal anything about her work. What she wanted was fairness, simple human fairness that every person deserved. But fairness had not been offered until her badge appeared. That was the part she couldn't shake. As she walked, she looked up at the tall buildings that lined the street. Each one was full of offices, workers, and long lines of people who probably felt the same frustration she had felt inside that lobby. She wondered how many of them had walked away unheard. A bus rumbled past her, blowing warm air onto the sidewalk. She paused to let a group of students pass. They laughed loudly, backpacks bouncing as they ran toward the next crossing. Their joy softened her thoughts a little. She kept walking, needing a moment alone before heading home. The city wasn't huge, but it had a few quiet corners if someone knew where to look. Lena turned down a smaller street lined with old trees whose leaves rustled gently. A little cafe sat at the corner, one she had visited a few times before. She pushed the door open. The warm smell of fresh bread greeted her. A young server behind the counter smiled politely, not recognizing her from anywhere, which was exactly what Lena preferred. "One tea, please," she said softly. The server nodded and prepared the cup. Lena took a seat by the window where sunlight poured in and lit the little table in a soft glow. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup and let her thoughts settle. People outside moved, like waves, always shifting. None of them knew what she carried in her bag. None of them knew the responsibilities attached to that badge or the hours she had spent working behind the scenes to keep communities safe. She didn't mind that. She never wanted fame. She didn't care for attention. Her life had always been about protecting others quietly as she sipped her tea. She thought back to the people in the lobby. The older man who smiled at her, the woman at the back who seemed relieved, even the clerk rude as she had been stayed in Lena's mind. What made someone become like that? Stress, habit, or simply forgetting that everyone who approached her counter had their own story, their own worries, their own life? Lena wished she could fix more than just the construction complaint. She wished she could help the system work better for everyone, but she also knew she couldn't. Fix everything in one day. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the supervisor. Team dispatched. "They're visiting your neighborhood now. I'll update you soon." She felt relief wash over her. She typed back a simple thank you and placed her phone on the table. Just as she was about to stand up, the cafe door opened, and a familiar voice called her name. It was a colleague, a quiet man who worked in her department. Known for his calm nature and sharp mind, he approached her table looking concerned. "I heard you were at the municipal office today," said as he took the seat across from her. Lena raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast. Too fast," he sighed. One of the guards called the emergency line, saying someone with an official badge showed up unexpectedly. "They described you. I knew it had to be you." Lena rubbed her temple lightly. "I wasn't there for official work," he nodded. "I know. But when someone flashes a badge in a government building, people get nervous." "I wasn't trying to scare anyone," she said. "I only wanted them to listen." He gave her a sympathetic smile. "I know you, Lena. You're probably the last person who would use authority for the wrong reason. But the staff there, well, they're not used to being challenged." "I didn't challenge them," she replied quietly. "I simply asked for help." He sighed again, looking tired. Sometimes asking is enough to feel like a challenge to people who forgot why their job exists. She looked down at her tea. The surface rippled slightly, as if reflecting her own emotions. "Did I do the wrong thing?" she asked. He shook his head immediately. "No, you did what any citizen has the right to do. And you were patient longer than most people would have been. If anything, you handled it better than anyone else could have." Lena appreciated his words, but something inside her still felt heavy. Her colleague then leaned forward. "What's important is that you didn't misuse your position. You used it only when you were pushed into a corner. That makes a difference." She nodded slowly. "Are they really sending a team today?" he asked. Double quotes. "Yes. The supervisor promised they would check everything." He relaxed a bit. "Good, because I've seen those neighborhoods. If the construction is causing even half of what you described, it needs to be looked at." Lena took a deep breath. "I just hope the families living there will be safe." "They will," he said. "You made sure of that." He stood up after a moment. "I should head back." "Just wanted to check on you. Thank you for stopping by," she said. He gave her a small nod and left. The cafe became quiet again, just the soft music and the clinking of cups in the background. Lena sat there for a few more minutes before finishing her tea and heading out. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, her phone buzzed again, another message from the supervisor. You may want to come home. The safety team wants to speak with you. Lena felt a mix of anxiety and purpose. She started walking toward the bus stop, each step bringing her closer to whatever she might find in her neighborhood. When she arrived, the street was buzzing with activity. 2 official vehicles were parked near the construction site. Workers stood around, looking confused and slightly nervous. A few of Lena's neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering anxiously. Children watched from porches. Elderly residents leaned on their canes, their eyes sharp with concern. When Lena stepped off the bus, some of her neighbors spotted her. There she is, someone whispered. She's the one who went to the office this morning. Another said. Lena walked toward them with calm steps, offering a small smile. Is everything all right? She asked. One of the men pointed toward a large crack running along the side of an old house. They say this could be dangerous. The safety team approached Lena. One of them, a tall woman with a clipboard, greeted her politely. You're the one who filed the report? Yes, Lena said. We've been assessing the site. You were right to raise concerns. The construction is too close to residential structures. The ground is unstable. This could become a serious issue if not addressed. Neighbors gasped softly. A mother hugged her young son. A group of teenagers exchanged worried glances. Lena kept her expression calm, though she felt a pang of anger at the thought that these risks had been ignored for so long. What happens now? She asked. We'll issue an immediate halt to the construction until a full safety review is completed. The inspector replied, We will also make sure families living near the affected area are supported. The construction supervisor, a man with dust-covered clothes, approached nervously. Ma'am, we didn't know it was causing problems. No one from the office told us about complaints. Lena nodded. I understand. But the families here have been worried for weeks. He swallowed hard. We'll cooperate fully with the review team. Safety inspector nodded. Good. Because this needs to be fixed properly. Lena stepped aside as her neighbors surrounded her. Many thanked her. Some touched her arm gently. Others simply looked relieved. You saved our homes, older woman said. You saved our kids, a father added. Lena shook her head softly. No, I just spoke up. That's something anyone here could do. But they disagreed. They insisted she had done more than that. After a while, the crowd began to disperse. Children ran off to play, their earlier worry forgotten. A few workers remained, talking quietly with the safety team. Lena finally walked toward her own home. It was a small place, simple, clean, peaceful. She stepped inside and let out a slow breath. Today had been much more than she expected. She set her bag down and sat on the edge of her bed. The house seemed unusually quiet. As if giving her space to breathe, she thought about the people in the office, the people in her neighborhood, and the people she saw every day who moved through life without being noticed. Her badge had changed everything in that moment. Yes, but the truth was, Lena didn't want people to act differently because of her job. She wanted people to act differently because it was the right thing to do. She lay back for a moment, closing her eyes. The day wasn't over yet, but she had taken another step toward making things right. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she allowed herself to rest, just a little before facing whatever came next. The air inside the office felt different. The moment she stepped back from the counter, it was heavier, filled with the sound of shuffling papers, quiet whispers, and the tapping of impatient fingers. But the tension was something she felt even more deeply. It pressed against her chest, reminding her that she had already given this place more patience than it deserved. Still, she stayed calm, because losing her composure never solved anything. She stood there at the edge of the counter, holding her small folder against her side. For a moment, she considered leaving and trying another day, but she reminded herself why she came. The construction near her neighborhood was not a small issue. People were concerned. Kids walked past that site every morning, There were loose wires, unstable metal sheets, and no warning signs. She knew that if she walked away now, nothing would change. And she wasn't the type of person who ignored problems simply because they were inconvenient. The clerk, who had spoken rudely to her, was now whispering something to the supervisor. Every few seconds, he shot a look in her direction, as the room felt as if it had turned to stone the moment she opened the wallet. No one moved, not even the clerk who had been tapping her pen non-stop just moments earlier. All of them stared, waiting to understand what exactly they were looking at. And while she did not rush, she also did not drag out the moment. She simply lifted the edge of the badge so it caught the light, making it impossible for anyone to mistakenly claim they didn't see it. A soft gasp came from someone in the back of the waiting area. Another person whispered something too faint to catch. The security guard, who had stepped forward earlier with uncertainty, now stepped back as if giving her space was the only logical thing to do. His expression changed, not to fear, but to immediate understanding. He knew exactly what that badge meant and what situation he had nearly walked himself into without knowing. The supervisor, however, stood frozen. His mouth parted slightly, but no words escaped. He looked as if he needed a moment to process what he was seeing, and even then he couldn't fully make sense of it. It was clear he had never expected someone like her to have any kind of authority beyond being a citizen filing a complaint. The badge rested in her hand quietly, but its presence filled the room louder than any shout ever could. She didn't wave it or push it toward anyone. She simply held it the way someone holds something they earned through real work and real responsibility. Finally, she spoke in a tone calm enough to contrast sharply with the tension around her. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she said. "I came here to file a legitimate safety report. I expected to be treated the same way any person should be treated, with basic respect." Her eyes met the supervisor's. He swallowed hard. His earlier confidence vanishing, she continued, "What you see here isn't a threat. It's just proof that I know the process. I know the regulations. And I know exactly what's supposed to happen when a potential hazard is reported." The clerk, who had giggled earlier, now looked down at her desk, refusing to make eye contact. Her posture shrank, her previous amusement disappearing completely. The second clerk shifted uncomfortably, as if trying to distance himself from the entire situation. The supervisor ran a hand over the back of his neck, trying to look composed but failing. The guard cleared his throat softly. "Ma'am, I didn't know," he said quietly. She offered him a small nod, acknowledging that she understood. "I know you didn't." Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was steady in a way that made the silence in the room even heavier. The supervisor finally spoke, but his voice came out much softer than before. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" She closed the wallet gently. "I shouldn't have to say anything for you to do your job properly." Those words hung in the air like a truth no one could argue with. For a moment, no one spoke. People waiting in line watched with quiet interest, some even leaning forward slightly as if they were witnessing something important, something that rarely happened in places like this. The supervisor straightened his posture, but he no longer carried the attitude he had earlier. His voice was stiff, almost shaky. All right, let me get your report. We'll take care of it immediately." She nodded once. "Thank you. That's all I asked for." He hurried behind the counter, flipping through files with a nervous speed that made it clear he had never worked this fast in his life. The clerk next to him scrambled to assist, her earlier attitude replaced with a frantic desire to appear helpful, as they searched for the form she had brought in. The security guard quietly stepped to the side, giving her the space and dignity he realized she had deserved all along. He kept his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes lowered respectfully. The people sitting nearby exchanged soft murmurs. A woman in a green jacket whispered to someone beside her. I knew something was off with how they were treating her. The person next to her nodded slowly, as if agreeing that this moment felt like justice arriving quietly. Finally, the supervisor returned, holding her paperwork carefully, almost as if it were something fragile. His attitude had transformed completely. He placed the document on the counter with both hands. "Here it is," he said quickly. "I'll enter it into the system personally, and we'll have someone from the inspection team handle it right away. No delays." She looked at him with a calm expression. Good. Make sure the inspection happens before the end of the week. There are children walking through that area every day. It needs immediate attention. He nodded rapidly. Yes, absolutely. I'll schedule it as soon as you leave. She took a slow breath and placed her wallet back into her bag. Although she didn't show it, she felt a wave of emotion inside her, a mix of relief and weariness. Moments like this were never pleasant. She didn't enjoy revealing her badge or making people uncomfortable. She only used it when she needed to cut through barrier after barrier created by people who forgot that their job was to serve the public, not to intimidate or dismiss them. The clerk from earlier, her eyes still lowered, spoke in a small voice. Sorry if we were rude. We didn't know who you were. She looked at her, not unkindly but honestly. You shouldn't treat people respectfully, only when you know who they are. The clerk nodded, clearly impacted by the remark. The supervisor opened his mouth as if to apologize as well, but the words stuck. Maybe he felt too embarrassed, or maybe he didn't know how to say sorry in a genuine way. Instead, he adjusted his glasses and mumbled, "Well, it won't happen again." She didn't respond. She simply gathered her papers and stepped back from the counter. The guard moved aside respectfully, and the path to the exit was clear. The people in the room watched her with a mix of admiration and quiet surprise. But just as she reached the door, she heard the faint sound of someone calling her, "Ma'am, wait." It was the supervisor. He hurried toward her, holding a small receipt-like slip. "This is the confirmation number for the case, my direct extension. If there are any issues, you can contact me personally." She accepted the slip with a polite nod. "Thank you." His face reddened slightly. "We'll handle it." "Seriously." She held his gaze for a moment. He seemed sincere, no more sincere than he had been all morning. With nothing more to say, she walked out of the office. The moment she stepped outside, the fresh air felt like a release. She took a slow breath, letting her shoulders relax. She didn't like conflict. She didn't like showing her badge. But sometimes it was the only way to make people see what they refused to notice. As she headed toward her car, she sensed the shift within herself, not of pride, but of responsibility. The badge wasn't a symbol of power, it was a reminder of the role she carried. A reminder that she wasn't just another citizen. She was someone entrusted with ensuring the system worked the way it was meant to. And today, she had used that responsibility exactly as she was supposed to, even if it meant silencing an entire room to do it. When she walked out of the building, she expected the moment to settle in quietly. She thought the morning would eventually fade into just another difficult experience, one she would file away in her memory and move on from. But the feeling stayed with her longer than she expected. She sat in her car for a few minutes, letting her hands relax on the steering wheel as the weight of the situation drifted slowly off her shoulders. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't frustrated. She was simply tired in a way that came from dealing with people who forgot what fairness and respect looked like. She took a slow breath and leaned back in her seat. The sun outside was bright, casting gold across the building's glass doors. People walked in and out, unaware of what had happened minutes earlier, and that was fine by her. She didn't want attention. She didn't want anyone to know who she was. She only wanted the right thing to be done. After a few minutes, she started the engine and drove toward her neighborhood. As she got closer to home, the construction site came into view, the very place that had pushed her to visit the office that morning. Several workers were moving around, carrying equipment and talking loudly. The metal sheets leaned dangerously close to the walkway. Few children were playing nearby, kicking a small ball across the street. She slowed her car as she approached, observing the area carefully. Nothing had changed since the last time she passed by. The same unsafe setup, the same disregard for the people who lived there. And seeing it again reminded her why she had gone to the office in the first place. She parked her car near the sidewalk and stepped out, watching the kids play. Their voices echoed through the street, full of laughter and energy. They had no idea how unsafe the area around them was. One of the boys chased the ball too close to the site, and a metal pole wobbled slightly. Her heart jumped even though the pole didn't fall. That was enough to remind her that waiting for the office to act wasn't an option. Something needed to be done now, at least temporarily, until the official inspection arrived. She approached the children gently. "Hey, can you move your game a bit farther that way? Just until the workers finish here. It's safer that way." The kids nodded without question, gathering their ball and moving down the street. She offered them a grateful smile and walked closer to the site, staying on the public sidewalk. She didn't speak to the workers, didn't argue, didn't demand anything. She simply observed, noting everything she would need to mention once the inspection team arrived. It didn't take long before one of the workers noticed her. He frowned and nudged another, whispering something. The second worker glanced at her and shrugged. She recognized a few of them. They had been dismissive before, brushing off concerns from residents. She had spoken to them once weeks ago, and they treated her as if she were bothering them. This time, they didn't approach her. They just watched her cautiously from a distance. Maybe it was the way she carried herself. Maybe they sensed that she wasn't here to argue. She was here to see for herself. After a few minutes, she took a few steps back and left the area. She didn't want anyone to feel provoked or assume she was there to cause problems. She simply wanted to be sure she had all the details ready when the case moved forward. Later that afternoon, she received a phone call. When she saw the number, she recognized the office code instantly. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" she said calmly. A nervous voice responded on the other end. "Ma'am, this is the supervisor from earlier. I wanted to let you know that an inspection team has been assigned to your case. They should be at the construction site later today." She wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. Normally, cases took days, sometimes weeks to even get reviewed. "All right," she replied. "Thank you for letting me know." There was a brief pause, as if the supervisor wasn't sure what to say next. Then he cleared his throat. "And I wanted to apologize for everything today. We shouldn't have treated you the way we did." She listened in silence. "I understand you probably don't want to hear excuses," he continued, "but we made assumptions, and that's on us. It won't happen again." She took a slow breath. Part of her appreciated the apology. Part of her knew people only apologized when they realized the consequences of their actions. Either way, she accepted it. "Thank you," she said simply. He sighed softly, maybe relieved. "We're taking your case seriously now, I promise." After the call ended, she stared at her phone for a moment, thinking about how quickly things had changed. People often treated others based on what they assumed. Sometimes a person had to remind them quietly, firmly of the truth. A couple of hours later, a white van with inspection markings pulled up near the construction site. She happened to be nearby, speaking with a neighbor about unrelated matters. They both looked up when the inspectors stepped out. The neighbor beside her raised an eyebrow. "Looks like something's finally happening." She nodded. Yes, it needed to. The inspectors walked around the site, taking pictures, making notes, and speaking with the workers. Their tone was professional but strict. The workers, who had seemed so confident and dismissive earlier, now looked uneasy as they answered questions. Some of them hurried to move materials into safer positions. Others put up temporary warning signs. For the first time since the project began, real order was being introduced. She kept her distance. She didn't want the workers to think she was responsible for the inspection, even though she was. She only wanted things fixed. Nothing else. One of the inspectors spotted her from across the street and gave a small nod. She returned the gesture subtly. She didn't need to explain anything. The badge in her bag had already spoken where she chose not to. Over the next hour, the team worked through the site, documenting every issue. Eventually, the lead inspector approached her. "We'll be issuing a temporary stop notice," he said. "They can't continue until they secure the area properly. It was a good thing you reported this." She nodded softly. "I just didn't want anyone getting hurt. You did the right thing," he said. When the inspectors left, the workers began clearing the area carefully. Some of them glanced her way not with anger, but with a kind of quiet respect. They finally understood someone was watching. Someone who cared about the safety of the people who lived there. The neighborhood felt calmer that evening. Parents walked with their children without worrying. People stood outside discussing the sudden inspection. relieved that action was finally being taken. As she walked home, a neighbor approached her with a gentle smile. "Did you have something to do with all this?" She returned the smile softly. "I just filed a report. That report might have prevented something serious," the neighbor replied. "Thank you." She didn't need praise, but hearing gratitude felt warm. It reminded her that even small actions could create real change. Later that night, she sat by her window, looking out over the quiet street. She replayed the events of the day not with pride, but with reflection. She wished the office staff had treated her better without needing to see her badge. She wished every person who walked into a public office was treated fairly. Regardless of who they were or what authority they carried, her badge sat on the table beside her. She looked at it for a moment. It wasn't something she used to feel powerful. It wasn't something she showed unless she had no choice. It was simply a responsibility, a tool, to make sure people were heard when the system tried to silence them. And today, it had done exactly that. Tomorrow, life would go back to normal. She would return to her quiet routine. People would forget the moment that had frozen her room. But she wouldn't, because every experience like this reminded her why her work mattered, why staying calm mattered, and why doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, was always worth it. She turned off the lamp beside her and sat back. Letting the quiet settle, she had walked into a room earlier that day as just another citizen, but she left as a reminder to everyone who saw that respect should never depend on a badge. It should simply depend on being human.